We have reached the end of the story of King David. And by we, I mean the lectionary, not particularly us, because we missed several days of the story, not only because we weren't here, but it was interjected with some, days with mandatory readings outside of this scope. So if you want to read more of the story of King David, go open your Bible at home. But at the end of the sort of collection, the narrative of King David, which didn't necessarily happen at the end of the story of Samuel or at the end of the story of Saul, but the church has decided to step away from the stories of 1st and 2nd Samuel before we start the story of 1st Kings, which is what tomorrow is. We're going to continue the narrative. It's going to pick right up where we left off yesterday. But they sort of interject this interlude that is a quick recap of all of the life of King David. So if you notice, the reading is from Sirach, not from Samuel or Kings. And I think this very much illustrates the sort of cyclical nature of the scriptures. That one part of the Bible is referring to another part. If all we had of King David was what was recorded in Sirach, we would be very impoverished in the life of King David, because it only hits the highlights. And in that, often without a lot of detail. But instead, now we have both things. And of course, King David is one of the most important figures in the Old Testament. So, he's a bad example of the way the Bible works, because the Bible does a lot of things for him that it doesn't do for anybody else. Like, you think Abraham gets like 4 pages in Genesis, and David gets page after page after page after page in 2 Samuel. But, Genesis is an old book, and Samuel is a newer book. And there were different themes and different styles of writing and the importance of this figure or that figure. David plays a key role in the sort of mind and consciousness of the people of Israel at a sort of human level, but also in the understanding of who they are as a religious people, and becomes, obviously, one of the major languages that we use, that God uses to describe the coming Messiah. One of the ways you can understand Jesus is that he is the new David. He's the new king. He's the fulfillment of all the prophecies. He's the fulfillment of all the prophecies, but he's the fulfillment of all the prophecies of King David in the future. And so you sort of get them returning. This would be, at the human level, us thinking about the great figures of American history, like Abraham Lincoln, like George Washington. I know those are out of order. That's not what I meant to say. Martin Luther King Jr. These people that have made, they're not just historical figures. They are historical figures who have shaped the way that we think and act without necessarily us having to think about them anymore. And King David, it fills one of those roles. Obviously, Abraham, Moses also fill those roles. But David does it in a way that's closer to the contemporary period than all of those others. And so the lectionary decides it's worthwhile to take a day. We're going to step out of the narrative and sort of have this like song in between the two movements. Because now we're shifting from the life of David the king to the life of Solomon the king. And this is the apex of Jewish kingship and culture, right? David was going up. Solomon got to sit at the tippy top, and then it pretty much is a cliff on the other end. But you got to enjoy. This is why it's important to enjoy the day you have today, because tomorrow, no clue. Everybody was having a good time in December of 2019, right? It was a great year. It was a wonderful year. And everybody's having a great time in January of 2020. And by the end of February, we all moved into a hellscape that we had never expected or experienced before in the COVID pandemic. That's why it's so important that you enjoy today. Or at least, there's a lot of wrong ways to take enjoy, but appreciate the good that today has, because you don't know what bad tomorrow will carry.